Hey guys, in today's video I bring you an impressive story full of mystery. Let's meet Isadora Mendez, a nurse from the United States who died for 10 minutes during a shift and came back with a direct message from Jesus about what will happen in 2025. What she saw on the other side is scary, revealing, and could change everything you believe about the future of humanity. So leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Oh, and comment below which city you are watching this video in. I want to know how far this message will reach. Now get ready, because what comes next is a true journey between life, death, and the destiny of the world. Bozeman is one of those small cities where the sky seems bigger than the earth itself. The kind of place where you see the stars at night, but still feel the weight of the world on your shoulders. It was a freezing Tuesday, the kind of night where the wind cuts through your soul and makes you want to disappear under the covers. But I was in the hospital. Night shift in the emergency ward. I have been a nurse for over 10 years. Solo mother for 9 years. After Gail's father left us, my life became a succession of long shifts, overdue bills, and silent prayers that I no longer knew who they were directed to. Maybe it was just venting. The emergency room was eerily quiet that night. I was giving a new antibiotic to a patient who had arrived with a lung infection. I remember feeling a strange burning sensation in my throat right after opening the ampule. And then the dizziness came. The light started to spin as if I were inside an old runaway merry-go-round. "Isadora, are you okay?" I heard one of the paramedics ask, but my voice didn't come out. I took 2 staggering steps and collapsed. I felt the impact of the ground, but it was like falling through cotton wool. Within seconds, my body was there, but I wasn't there anymore. The sound became muffled, as if someone had put pillows in my ears. I saw my body lying on the emergency room floor and the other nurses running around me trying to revive me. "Code blue, code blue. She's going into shock." But I wasn't afraid. No pain. I just felt lightness. It was as if someone had finally lifted the weight of my existence. Everything that hurt in me, my spine, my chest, my soul, and disappeared. That's when I heard a voice. It didn't belong to anyone there. It was inside me. But it was more real than any sound I've ever heard in my life. "You're not done yet." It was as if that voice knew me, as if he knew everything I had ever experienced. And at that moment, a gentle, almost maternal force began to pull me up. I climbed through a space that wasn't really a tunnel. It was more like a stream of living, golden light. A good warmth enveloped my body. Or my soul? I don't know. I just know it was more real than anything I'd ever felt awake. And then, the whispers began. They came from all sides, as if thousands of people were praying at the same time. Voices, in different languages, crying, begging, waiting for something, and in their midst, a familiar voice. "Please God, don't let my mother die." It was Gail, my son, and there, for the first time in a long time, I felt something that had been dormant inside me, hope, and a calling that would lead me to an impossible truth, and an encounter that would change everything. Floating isn't quite the right word. It was more like, be taken. I made no effort, and yet I moved forward. The tunnel of light around me seemed endless, but it wasn't empty. There was a vibration, there a soundless music, a feeling that everything around was alive and conscious. The particles of light didn't just shine, they knew that I was there. Deep down, my rational mind was trying to fight. This is a dream. A hallucination. You're lacking oxygen in your brain. But that voice, the skeptic, the logical one, the one that always saved me in difficult times was increasingly far away. And another part of me, much older, much deeper, whispered, "You know better." Then the tunnel ended, and what I saw next made me lose my breath, if I was still breathing. It was as if I had left the earth and reached the core of something sacred. A golden field that stretched beyond the horizon, covered in a glowing mist that seemed made of memory and love. There were buildings there, but they were not made of stone or wood. They were like living structures of energy and light that vibrated with meanings. And everything there, everything, was vaguely familiar to me, like a place you dreamed of as a child and forgot about when you woke up. There were figures in the distance, human shapes, some transparent, others more solid. They didn't seem to walk. They just seemed moved by thought. No one spoke, but everyone knew what the other felt. The peace was so absolute that I felt emotional without knowing why. One of these figures came to me. It had no face, but its presence radiated calm. It was like being embraced by the longing for everything I had ever loved. When she got close, I felt something shift inside me, an expansion, as if my heart was remembering something it had always known. "You are on the threshold," the presence said without moving its lips, "between what was and what will be." "I died?" I asked, not knowing if I was speaking with my mouth or with my soul. "Your body has stopped, but you are not finished yet," the presence responded. "There's something you need to see, something you need to remember, and then choose." To choose? What? My mind was still trying to understand everything, but there was no more time for questions. Suddenly, the light field dissolved, and in its place a path appeared, not made of stone, not of earth, but made of memories. Every step I took, an image of my past emerged. The day Gale was born. The first time I dropped him off at kindergarten, the nights crying hidden in the bathroom, the laughter under the blanket on stormy days. And then, at the end of the path, there was someone waiting for me. The presence that changed everything, who interrupted the course of my death with a mission that I would never have imagined receiving. The path of memories ended where time seemed to not exist. The light around me condensed into something denser, closer, as if preparing the space for something sacred. The air, if it was air, became lighter and denser at the same time. A feeling of awe came over me. I didn't know why, but my body and/or soul began to bow on its own. That's when I saw him. He walked towards me with slow, steady steps, surrounded by a light so intense that I could barely keep my eyes open. And still, I couldn't look anywhere else. The light didn't hurt. It cleaned. I felt every particle of my soul being washed, healed, welcomed. He wore a simple white robe, but there was a silent majesty about it that took my breath away. And when he looked up, my knees went weak. The eyes. Oh, the eyes. There was no defining color. They were like windows to a universe that knew my every pain, every forgotten hope, every mistake, every scar. And yet, it only transmitted love. A love so pure that it was almost unbearable. It was so beautiful. Love that doesn't demand, doesn't punish, just loves. And there I knew, not with my head, but with my whole being, that that man was Jesus. "Isadora," he said, and my name on his lips was like a song that had always existed. "Why me?" I asked, barely able to hold back the tears. "I'm nothing. I don't really believe. I just survive." He smiled, a smile that dissolved 1,000 guilts in an instant. "That's why. You live with a tired heart, but you never stop loving. Even in silence. Even without knowing if anyone heard you." With each word, I felt myself being rebuilt inside. "You were chosen because you know pain, and only those who know pain can recognize the miracle." Jesus then reached out his hand, and when he placed it on my shoulder, everything around me changed. The light expanded in all directions and became screen. A living canvas. Before us, scenes began to form, and I saw the world. First, the known landscapes, cities, schools, hospitals, forests. Everything seemed normal. But soon the signs came. Dust storms in places where there were only wheat fields. Floods covering entire neighborhoods. People attacking each other because of opinions. children crying alone in dark hallways, and above all, a spiritual silence, an emptiness. The world is forgetting, Jesus said with sadness in his eyes, forgetting to love, to care, to believe. I wanted to look away, but he held my hand. Don't look with fear, look with compassion. There is more to see. And that was when I understood. This was just the beginning. The visions that would come would not just be a warning. They would be a calling. And I would have to be the messenger. The images around us began to move like waves. Each scene came and went like a sigh from the earth itself. They weren't memories, they were notices, fragments of a future still in gestation. I saw what looked like a coastal city, perhaps Miami or New Orleans, being swallowed by a giant wave. People were running, but there was nowhere to run. Elsewhere, I saw fires consuming entire forests in the western United States. It was a bright, chaotic red, as if nature itself was screaming in pain. But why? I asked. Why is all this happening? Jesus responded without haste. His voice held no judgment, only truth. The heart of humanity is hardening. Ego is taking the place of spirit. Creation is crying out for balance, but men no longer listen. The scenes changed. Now I saw a school. The children weren't playing. They were isolated, looking at screens with expressionless faces. I saw families sitting at the table, but no one looked at each other. I saw empty churches and in their place temples of consumption. I saw the spiritual world being treated as fiction and pain being treated as routine. They are forgetting that they are one body, Jesus continued. They were divided between races, ideas, parties, religions, but they forgot the essential thing: love. I felt a tightness in my chest. It was as if each scene ripped out a part of my heart. I tried to look away, but Jesus' hand held mine firmly. Not to force, but to support me. Then I saw something that took my breath away. I saw my son, Gale, but not as he is today. He was a man. I walked through dark streets surrounded by abandoned buildings. His look was sad. He held a book, the Bible, but no one wanted to hear what he said. He spoke of faith, forgiveness, love, but he was ignored, ridiculed. That devastated me. Is that what's going to happen to him? Not necessarily, Jesus replied. You still have a chance to change this. How? I'm just one person. I have no followers. I don't even know if they'll believe me. Jesus approached and placed his hand on my heart. It's not about convincing, it's about remembering. Truth touches souls, even when ears are closed. And a single flame can reignite an entire forest. At that moment, something inside me lit up, a kind of sacred urgency. I knew that if I didn't share what I was seeing, if I didn't let the world know, I would be denying my life's purpose. But Jesus was not finished yet. You've seen what happens when love is forgotten. Now you'll see what happens when it's remembered. That the visions changed tone. Light began to emerge in the midst of darkness, and with it, hope. The images around me began to change. Slowly, the darkness of the previous scenes was swept away by a golden light that emerged like dawn over the rubble. The pain was still there, but now it was accompanied by something new, something alive, something that can only be called hope. I saw communities gathered in the midst of destruction, but there was unity. People of different origins, races, and beliefs helping each other without asking for anything in return. I saw men who used to walk armed now holding hands, forming prayer chains. I saw women who had lost everything being taken in by strangers who became family. Jesus looked at me and said, "This happens when the heart turns to me, when fear gives way to faith, when pain makes room for love." In one of the scenes, I saw an open field where hundreds of people were kneeling in silence. There were no microphones, no stages, no leaders, just voices whispering prayers. The sky, previously gray, began to open. A ray of sunlight illuminated those people, and a gentle breeze blew like a divine kiss. I could feel that. God's presence was palpable. I saw hospitals where terminally ill patients, once without hope, were beginning to recover, not because of advanced technology, but because of something invisible. I saw doctors kneeling beside beds and praying with families. Discreet but undeniable miracles happened in front of everyone. But why only now? I asked, feeling the tears flow. Why is it only when everything collapses that people remember? Jesus responded with compassion. Because it is in absence that many realize the value of presence. Pain is not punishment. It is an invitation, a call to what is eternal. Then I saw something that touched me even more deeply. I saw my son Gail, now an adult, but in a different setting. This time he wasn't walking alone. He would hold a child's hand and read to him, not from a book, but from the heart. He talked about forgiveness, from a fresh start. And all around, other people approached, listening, smiling, crying. He had become a light for others. Jesus told me, "What you sow today will flourish in your child's path. He will not be destroyed by darkness if you sow light now." Everything in me cried, of repentance, of gratitude, of renewal. I had lived for years believing I was alone, carrying the world on my shoulders. But there, in that sacred dimension, I realized that I've never been alone. He was always there, even when I didn't see it, even when I doubted. But what about the world? I asked. What will happen to the world? Jesus looked at me seriously and tenderly. The world will be the reflection of hearts. There is still time, but we must start now. I knew what was coming next. The mission, the return. But before that, Jesus wanted to show me one more thing. What it means truly believe. Jesus led me to what appeared to be a pool of water, but it wasn't a reflection, it was a revelation. As I got closer, I saw images appear on the surface as if the water were alive. There were no longer catastrophes nor crowds. Now they were common lives. Simple people. Like me. The first image was of an elderly woman sitting alone on a porch, with an open Bible on her lap. She prayed quietly, her hands shaking. The scene seemed small, almost imperceptible, until the vision expanded. That solitary prayer had created a domino effect. Her grandson, who was involved in drugs, that same night had a vivid dream about his grandmother praying for him. He woke up in tears and decided to seek help. Days later, he was in a support group. A month later, he helped others. A single faithful heart, and dozens of lives touched. Jesus looked at me and said, "You don't need to save the whole world. You just need to rekindle what is extinguished around you. Every gesture of love multiplies." The scenes continued. A man walking to the house of his brother he hadn't spoken to in years, knocking on the door, crying, asking for forgiveness. And with this gesture, healing an entire family that had been fractured for decades. I saw a teenager in a cafe who, upon realizing that a colleague was being bullied, simply sat with her, talked, smiled. That was enough to stop that girl from giving up on her own life weeks later. These small decisions are bigger than they seem. They alter the course of the future, said Jesus. Because where there is faith, there is strength. And where there is love, there are miracles. I began to understand. It wasn't about warning the world like a desperate prophet. It was about touching one heart at a time and trust that God would do the rest. I felt a mixture of humility and urgency. I thought about all the times I could have been that bridge and wasn't. Every day that I was so immersed in my own problems that I failed to notice the pain of others. Jesus then placed his hand on my chest, and I felt something extraordinary. It was as if a soft flame was kindling inside me, but it didn't burn. It warmed up, expansive, alive, a spark of something eternal. And then he said, "You will carry this light when you return. And even if they call you crazy, even if they mock, even if they ignore you, Carry on. Because this light is not yours. It is mine. And no one can turn it off. I cried, not out of sadness, but out of a kind of love that rebuilt me from the inside. Love that gave me a new name, a new meaning, a new mission. But I still needed to understand how to bring this light to such a dark world. Jesus then showed me what happens when someone dares to speak, even without knowing how they will be heard. You need to see what happens when someone chooses to tell the truth, Jesus told me, and then the light around us spun like a living spiral, pulling me into another vision. Suddenly, I was in an ordinary, small room, lit only by a ceiling lamp. A woman. I recognized it immediately. It was me, sitting in front of a simple camera, speaking with a choked voice. He was telling everything he had experienced on that other side, the tunnel, the light, Jesus, the visions, the mission. But on the other side of the screen, I saw what few see, the faces of people listening. Some were crying, others frowned skeptically. I saw comments being typed hastily, harsh, mocking words, but I also saw hands that closed laptops in silence, and hearts that, even though they were still, began to vibrate at another frequency. Jesus explained to me, "Not everyone will listen to you. Not everyone will believe. But you weren't called to convince. You were called to sow." I saw a man sitting alone in an office, hard, skeptical. He watches the video by chance. I laughed at the beginning, but days later he watches it again, and at that moment he remembers his grandmother taking him to church. Something starts to stir inside him. He decides to pray for the first time in years. There begins an invisible miracle. I saw a teenager who suffered in silence with thoughts of suicide. The video appears in your feed. When you hear me say, "Jesus told me that no one is alone," she starts to cry. That night, instead of ending her own life, she writes a letter to her mother. It's the fresh start. "You won't see all the seeds blooming," Jesus said, looking sweet, "but each of them will change the world in some way." Then I saw myself walking through hospital corridors, now with something different in my eyes. It wasn't just tiredness, it was purpose. He spoke to patients more tenderly. He prayed in silence while applying medicine. He touched the hands of those who were alone, and even when I didn't speak directly about what I had experienced, something in me conveyed it. And then, I saw the consequences of my choice to speak out. Friends moving away, some people saying I had gone crazy, doctors suggesting post-traumatic stress. The pain of rejection was real. But in the midst of all this, Jesus showed me a detail that broke my heart. My son, Gail, listening to me with shining eyes. He believed. He listened to me. And most importantly, he was being shaped by this new light I brought. "Even if no one else believes, he will believe," said Jesus, "and that's enough to change generations." I took a deep breath. I was starting to understand. The mission was not to shout to the world, was to live the truth, even in silence. I knew the moment was coming. There were no clocks in that place, but my heart, or what was left of it, already felt the call of the earth pulling me back. Lightness began to become weight, clarity, fog. I looked at Jesus with eyes full of tears. I didn't want to go. "I belong here." "Not there," I whispered, feeling something akin to despair. He walked over and placed his hands on my shoulders. There was infinite tenderness in that gesture, as if he understood every layer of my pain before I even formulated them. "You belong to both," he said. "But your mission is still in the world." "But the world is dark. It's hard, it's deaf," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "What am I going to do there, alone?" Jesus looked at me with a love that cannot be explained, a love that crosses centuries, sins, falls. "You will not be alone. I will be with you, always, even when you doubt, even when you are silent, even when you think you have failed." I felt a peace spread over me, like a warm, gentle wave that touched every painful memory of my existence. He then showed me one last image. It was the earth, seen from above, like a blue jewel surrounded by shadow. But in specific spots, there were lights on, small flames. One there, another there, and as I watched, these flames began to multiply. One lit another, and another, and another one. Soon, all darkness was being dissolved. These lights, are they people? I asked. They are hearts that have awakened. Jesus replied, not out of fear, but out of love. Not out of urgency, but out of truth. I saw ordinary people, drivers, teachers, parents, young people, old people, all carrying small internal flames, living more compassionately, praying in silence before a gesture, hugging without haste, choosing to forgive. That was it. This was how the world changed. Jesus touched my chest for the last time. A light turned on inside me, strong but sweet. You will take this with you. Don't try to be grandiose, be truthful. Say what you saw. Love without expecting return. Help without expecting recognition. Forgive even when it hurts. That's faith. That's light. The place around us began to dissolve, as if reality was moving away. The heavenly melody returned, but now it felt like goodbye. And even then, it wasn't the end. It was beginning. When in doubt, come back to this moment, Jesus said, and remember, I will be in every gesture of love, in every whisper of faith, in every soul that wakes up. What if I forget? I asked, my voice shaking. Your heart will remember, he replied. Then, with one last look, he walked away, and I was enveloped by a force that pulled me back with speed, with purpose, with destiny. The sky disappeared. The sound disappeared. The light went out. And then, the return was like falling from a dream into an earthquake. My body felt distant, heavy, like an old cocoon that I needed to put on again. Everything was dark, stuffy. Distorted sounds began to pierce the veil of silence. Alarms, rushing voices, someone crying. Then, suddenly, a loud, dry sound. A scream. She's coming back, heart rate rising. My eyelids weighed tons, but I managed to open my eyes for a second. The white lights of the hospital blinded me. Everything was spinning. The physical pain returned, reminding me of where I was. But something inside me, it was no longer the same. My heart was beating. My body breathed. But my soul carried the sky. I cried, not because of the pain, but because of the separation. He had left the place where everything made sense, where love was the air, where my name was known by someone who loved me completely. The first voice I recognized was Dr. Sanders, our cardiologist. She held my wrist as if she were holding the last candle burning in the dark. Isadora, can you hear me? Answer me. My mouth was dry, but I managed to mutter, I saw him. She frowned. He who? Jesus. He spoke to me. The silence that followed was strange, uncomfortable. The nurse monitoring my signals looked away. One of the paramedics tried to hide a sigh. It was as if my words were a technical error, an emotional bug. But I knew what I had seen. And it didn't matter if no one else believed. Hours later, when my son Gale entered the room, it was as if time froze. He ran to me and hugged me so tightly that I felt my heart almost stop again. This time, with love. I held his face in my hands and said, You prayed for me. He nodded, his eyes filling with tears. I asked Jesus not to take you. He heard it, I replied, and smiled for the first time in a long, long time. In the days that followed, I began to walk, eat, and breathe as before. But nothing about me was the same as before. Colleagues avoided the subject. Some laughed behind their backs. Others looked at me with pity. But I felt neither crazy nor fragile. I felt awake. I started writing down everything I saw. Every detail, every word Jesus said to me, every vision of earth, both those of pain and those of redemption. And writing, I realized that this story, it wasn't just mine, it was a message, an appeal, a reminder that there is still time. There is still hope. And even without knowing how, I decided I would speak. Even if it was for one person. Not even if anyone believed it. Because I knew the truth. And she was alive inside me. Time passed. Enough for the story to become rumor. And then seed. Some called me crazy. Others called me a liar. But there were those, the quieter ones, who came to me just to say, I felt something when I heard you tell it. And it was for them that I continued. I recorded my simple story with my cell phone, sitting on the porch of our house in Bozeman, with the pine trees in the background and the vast sky behind me. No makeup, no script, no pretension. Just me, my voice and the truth burning in my chest. I told him about the moment of death, about the tunnel of light, about the encounter with Jesus, about visions of what is to come, of tragedies and also of miracles. I told him about the touch in my heart, about the words that changed everything. You carry the light. Don't try to be grand. Be true. Thought no one would hear, but they listened. First, there were some views, then thousands. People from all over the world writing to me, telling me about their own awakenings, asking forgiveness from family members, back to praying, lighting candles, loving again. Something was starting. And I knew it wasn't because of me. It was because of him. Giles started praying with me every night. He was the one who reminded me when I wanted to give up. Mom, we have to be light, remember? And how to forget. This story is not about me. It's about us. About what we choose to do when darkness knocks at the door. About how, even in the face of the greatest pain, we can still choose to love. We can still choose to believe. Jesus showed me two futures. A feat of destruction and oblivion. Another feat of reconnection, of compassion, of faith. But he made it clear. None of them are written. It all depends on us. And that's why I'm here telling you who hear me. All is not lost. There's still time. Go back to praying. Love again. Look into your eyes again. Forgive whoever hurt you. Welcome those who rejected you. Pray for those who despise you, and most of all, remember you were never alone. He's here. Always has been. Waiting. Whispering. Loving it. Maybe you, like me, are tired, discredited, surviving. But the light that touched me can also touch you. And when that happens, you will understand. You don't have to die to wake up. But sometimes, you almost have to die to remember what really matters. If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.